Happy Hanukkah.
Hanukkah.
Today, Tractate Yoma, page 24. We're going to discuss the halachot of Zar, someone who's foreign for the work in the Beit HaMikdash, such as, for sure, someone who's not a Kohen, but also if Kohen is somehow not ready or not capable, and he does some work, how basically we treat it. Also, we're going to continue with Trumat Adeshen, which is our discussion in the previous several sessions, that they have the ashes that remove from the altar, and we're going to discuss the amount and how you do that. So all of that is on page 24, 8 lines from the top of the page. When one is giving Truma, Truma is by halakha davar midavar, which means you take something from something and you have something that left over. What does that mean? It's called sharei nikarim, which means you take a truma, you take part of the, for the best description is like the contribution, or for our case, you take the ashes from the altar, but it's something left which called non-sacred, echulin. So by Rabbi Avin, Trumat Adeshen bekama. When you have to do this portion, which we explained yesterday and day before yesterday, you need to take the ashes that left over on the altar. What's the measure? How much you need to take? Mitrumat maaser yalfinallah or mitrumat midyan yalfinallah? Do we derive from that as a comparison? We have the truma, the contribution, that apply to maaser, which is Levi that received the tithe, the first tithe. He needs to take his own portion and give it to the Kohen. It's called trumat maaser. So if you derive a comparison to regular trumat maaser, it means that he needs to bring 1/10 from that, from the ashes he take on the altar. Or if you go by the midyan, the Torah tells us in book of Bamidbar, Numbers chapter 31, that they took a quote-unquote taxes from the people who goes to war, from the army men. The Torah used the word nefesh machamesha me'od, 1 in 500. Here you see two different type of trumot. One is anshei hatzava, the armen, and the second one is anshei ha'edah, the people in the congregation. So here we have a disputation between Rashi and Tosfot. Rashi said that the truma is 1 of 500. Tosfot said that it's 1 of 50. So in that sense, we try to compare it to our discussion. How much? Tashma, come and I show you a proof. The Tane Rabbi Chia, that Rabbi Chia learned, teach us in a Braita. Ne'emar kan, it's written in regard to Trumat Adeshen, veherim. The Kohen need to lift the deshen, the ashes. Ve'ne'emar le'alan, in regard to Korban Mincha, in Vayikra, in Leviticus chapter 6, veherim mimenu bekumtzo. When the Kohen take, he grab 3 fingers and he take. Ma lehalan bekumtzo. The same way as we do in the Mincha, which is melo shalosh etzbaot kfufot. You take 3 fingers and you use that. Now, afkan bekumtzo. The same here has to be remove a handle of ash. Now, Rashi tells us here that you cannot really compare it to mincha. Why? Because he said mincha is le'ikuva, which means if you do not take exactly the 3 fingers, amen. You don't take the 3 fingers, is le'ikuva, which means you do not fulfill. You have to make sure that is that amount you grab.
Can't have more.
Exactly. Now, here you have the issue of ktoret. You take an incense. So it's burning coal you cannot take it by hand. You use a kli, you use a vessel, right? Gechalim rotchim, you can't take it by hand. So how you do that? So you do omdena, you measure about 3 fingers. So Tosfot and Tosfot Yeshenim, Tosfot have a long discussion. Tosfot said that he said that in the Torah there are many shiurim. You have, if you open the subject of different shiurim, of different measurement, so you have Trumat Chala, you have many different shiurim. Why use that one? So Tosfot Yeshenim said in general that it's just a measurement, the umdena. You take in that vessel, because it's a burning coal, something that you measure about, and it's okay if it's a little more of the 3 fingers. Tosfot elaborate at length, for sure it's above the scope of our discussion today, but he elaborate what about all the other shiurim, all the other measurement in the Torah. Now, the next subject is in regards to zar. Zar, in general, we understand that is someone who is not a Kohen, but here we go a little further. In general, the Torah said, "Ve'azar karev yumat," that someone who is not involved with that deserve mitah. But here, Amar Rav, arba avodot, 4 type of work that zar, that someone who's foreign, perform, chayav alehem mitah. He deserve a death penalty by heaven. What does that mean? So we have here a concept of zar that he is not capable or not ready to do work. Can you give me an example? Who are these? For example, someone who's considering a foreign, a zar, that he is a Kohen, but he's not capable to do the work.
One who has a blemish?
For example, if he's tameh, if he's ritually impure. Or, for example, he's a pure, he's a tahor, but he's in a state of aninut. Or, good morning. Or, for example, if he's mechusar bgadim, if he doesn't wear all the garments. So, the Torah clearly not allow that Kohen to do the work because he is at that point incapable to do it. The Torah, the Tosfot Yeshanim elaborate on that, and he said the Torah used the word va'avadetem. Va'avadetem, which means avodat tama. You need to do a work that it's completed, not part of. So what does that mean? You have 4 different type of work that the Kohanim perform in Beit HaMikdash. Soon you see the list. So he tells us that this type of work, Kohen that perform this work, good morning, Kohen that perform this work, he deserves a mitah bidei shamayim, a heavenly death. So here let's go by the list. Zrika, he takes the blood of the korban from the altar and he sprinkles it. So Ritva and Meiri and also the Rambam said that it's not only sprinkle the blood, it can be others, all kind of sprinkling. Number 2, vehaktara. Haktara meaning what? Burning. Burning taking the incense.
Yep.
Incense. Number 3 is nisuch hamayim, the libation, the water libation on the altar on the festival of Sukkot. So we said here, zrika, haktara, nisuch hamayim, venisuch hayayin, and the wine libation on the altar. That's they're doing all year around. For example, a leper or someone who bring a burn offering or peace offering, either by individual or public. So he has, in addition, to have wine libation on the altar. So that's a famous Mishnah in Menachot, page 90. So Tosfot Yeshanim elaborate on that, and he said, if you think of it, you can take an example of Nisuch HaMayim. Nisuch HaMayim, it's basically type of work that it's concluded work, that it's completed everything that come earlier. So why you don't use that as an example, and that's basically included all the others. So he said, you have to remember that all the others you do every day. You do this type of work on a daily basis. This is just once a year. So he said, we want to be clear and specific that the Torah did not allow a Kohen to get involved in this type of work while he is not totally capable. And the Torah put such a strong word of warning that if he does that, he deserves a death penalty by heaven. That's so strong language. So the list is long. If he's ritually impure, if he lost his loved one before burial, if he is missing some of his garments, etc. So that's Rav's opinion. Velevi Amar, Levi add to that list of 4 different type of work, and he said, Af Trumat HaDeshen. Now, we have in our discussion Trumat HaDeshen. What we said Trumat HaDeshen is the ashes that left in the altar, we need to take it out, right? Mm-hmm. So he said that if someone is under the category of Zar, and what we understand now, we have a new dimension of Zar. Zar is no longer only someone who is not a Kohen.
It's a Kohen who is unfit in some way.
Someone who is unfit, very good. So he said, if anyone who's Zar does even a work of Trumat HaDeshen, which is the removal of ashes, he also deserves that heavenly death penalty. V'chen tani Levi b'matnitei. That's the way Levi learned in the Mishnah. Af Trumat HaDeshen. As we see, the point of departure in this disputation is a very different. It's not that Rav and Levi totally disagree. It's only over one item, which is in our Sugiyah, the Trumat HaDeshen, that Rav did not hold that that's considering work, that's considered type of work. So the Gemara asks, why Rav did not categorize Trumat HaDeshen, taking the ashes from the altar, as one of their work, since it's all of our discussion. Maita Amad Rav. The Chtiv, he zoom in for that pasuk. The Torah said, Ve'ata, ata applied to Aharon, uvanecha, and your children, your sons, itcha tishmeru et kehunatchem. You should observe the kehuna, lechol davar hamizbeach, ulemibeit laparochet va'avadetem, avodat matana eten et kehunatchem v'azar karev imad. So the Torah here use a certain word, and he zoom in and explain each and every word. Here are the limitations. Avodat matana velo avodat siluk. So he said that that's applied to what? To avodat matana. Avodat matana, Rashi said that all these lists, zrika, sprinkling, haktara, putting the incense, nisuch hamayim, water libation, all of that is under the category of service of gift. Velo avodat siluk. Siluk meaning you're removing the ashes from the altar. That's a different category. Rav did not hold that that's considering one of the categories. Va'avadetem, the Torah said clearly, and you shall serve. He interpreted it as referring to what? Avodat tamah. The service that has to be total, complete, on its own. For example, sprinkle the blood. Velo avodah sheyesh acharei avodah. And it's not applied to any service that it's only a preparatory, which you prepare step for another service after it completes its purpose. So it means all these 4 type of work that Rav mentioned, that's completed, okay? But the others, the removing the ashes, it's the next step. So in other words, you have, for example, receiving the blood, carrying the blood, and then you have zrika, the sprinkler. So the sprinkler one, it's basically completion of all the process, carrying, etc., etc. Here, it's different. It's removing the ashes of the altar. You cannot compare it. Now, which means, if you zoom in, that Zar, that someone foreign that does the work of total pure Kohanim, he is under the violation only if he fulfills 2 conditions. Number one, Ritva said, if it does type of work putting items in the place that is sacred, or if it does some type of work that it's not perpetuatory, that it's not proceeding with another one. So, another one, let's clarify. If you have a zar, someone who has issues, for example, he's impure, he's a Kohen that is impure, we put him in the category of zar, and he slaughter the animal, or he receive or carry the offering, the blood, he is not under the category of chayav mitah. Even he participated in the order of that type of work, yet he is not involved with the avodat tamah, with the full completed type of work. However, Rav hold that the same manner it's afterward if you remove the ashes by Kohen that is ritually impure under the category of zar, again he is not deserve mitah, a death penalty. That's why, because it said it's not avodat matana, it's not type of work that considering as a gift to Hashem in a sense of offering. It's only avodat siluk, you remove something from the altar. That's one school of thought. Levi have a different approach, and he said you have to put also Trumat Hadesh, removing the ashes, as one of those category that he deserved mitah. He said lechol dvar hamizbeach, since the Torah said, and he quote, I translated, in everything pertaining to the altar, so he derived from that teaches that all action performed on the altar, including the removal of ashes, are significant and are prohibited to a non-Kohen on pain of death. So the Gemara asks, V'rav hahu le'atuyei sheva hazaot shebifnim. How about Rav that hold all these, including seven sprinklings that are performed inside the sanctuary? So you basically does that. The Kohen does it inside the sanctuary, close to the parochet. So when the blood of certain offerings sprinkle on the veil of the Holy of Holies, that's part of the ritual. Or veshe bametzora, and you put the oil on the leper. So again, you do it inside the sanctuary, across from the Holy of Holies. So even those type of work is not devar hamizbeach, it's not part of the altar, because the Torah used the word lekol. Lekol is general word. So it means that even zar, even someone who's not totally fitting, does that. Levi hold that he deserves mitah, despite the fact that they are not performed on the altar. Velevi nafkalei. No, so that's the Rav, I'm sorry. So Levi, Velevi nafkalei midvar vechol dvar. And from where does Levi derive these cases? So he derived from the word, it looks like superfluous word, because the Torah used it twice. They used the word devar, pertaining to the altar, and then the Torah said everything pertaining. So it's imply a further inclusion, which is he derived in eternal sprinkling mentioned before. So he said that that's applied to both meaning including Trumat Hadesh, including ashes on the altar. V'rav, how Rav derived? So now devar v'chol devar lo darish. Rav does not derive anything particular from the distinction between the Torah expression davar, pertaining to the altar, and then v'chol davar, everything pertaining to the altar. He did not hold that drasha, that point of view. So what we understand, according to Levi's opinion, even at the end of the pasuk, at the end of the sentence, the Torah said the word avodat matana, which means it's type of gift to Hashem. You give it to the sacred, you give it to the Kodesh. But since the Torah used the word lechol dvar hamizbeach in anything related to the altar, it applies not only avodat matana, like incense, like libation of water. It's applied also avodat siluk, removing the ashes, like Trumat Hadeshen. So the Gemara said, ve'ema lechol dvar hamizbeach klal. As you remember, every single morning we said before Hodu the korbanot, and at the end we have the Rabbi Ishmael 13 principles, and here we apply to one of those principles. The Torah said, lechol dvar hamizbeach, in everything pertaining klal. What does that mean? Klal is generalization, is general statement. So it means any type of work that apply to the altar. Lechol dvar hamizbeach, anything related to the altar. So just klal, just a generalization of statement. Then the Torah said, avodat matana, a service of gift. Prat, that is a specification, which means specifically giving a gift on the altar, and therefore you can say that that's applied to the setup, clear, that the Torah specifically said a service of gift. So now you see klal ufrat, when you have a case of generalization followed by a specification. So one of the principles that we learn is en baklal ela ma shebaprat. The generalization includes only what mentioned explicitly in the specification. So therefore, if you follow that rule, you have to go and said avodat matana ein, avodat siluk lo. Placing the altar, which is avodat matana, it's specific. Yes, this is included, but avodat siluk, removing, service of removal, is not included. So that's one of the Rabbi Ishmael principles. So what we understand, that Trumat Hadeshen, removing the ashes, by this principle, so that's presented difficult to Levi. Why he included Trumat Hadeshen as part of that deserve mitah b'dei shamayim, a heavenly death penalty. So the Gemara responded and said, Amar Kra, the verse states.
Rabbi, just a quick question. When we're talking about a death penalty at the hands of heaven, how is that affected on earth? Is it, I mean, do we wait for something to happen, or do they actually have to stand trial before the Sanhedrin, or? Okay,
so it's a good question. There are two Gemarot that said, one is in Baba Batra, one is in Sanhedrin. The Gemarot said that all these four death penalty we mentioned in Yom Kippur, skila, srefa, hereg, chenek, all these different type, in a time of the Sanhedrin, the great rabbinic court, so they have the ability to do it by us, by human, by people. Mm-hmm. But the Gemara said that this type of punishment, it's existed, but it's not in our domain, it's not in our control. Only thing we can do is teshuvah. Right. So therefore, God forbid, I'm not applying to anything. I'm not one of those clergy that said this happened because of that. You know, it's a very dangerous path, and I never like to go that direction. I don't know if you remember, what is his name? Patterson, the guy that...
Pat Robertson, yeah.
Pat Robertson. So once when they force out the settler in around Gaza, in Gush Katif, if you remember, so he made a statement that Katrina happened as a result for that action. You remember that? And it creates turmoil in the world. I never liked this attitude, because who are we to determine what's happened because of what? We do not know. What we do know, just according to those Gemarot, that it exists. That it is. We do believe when we say Shema, V'ayim Shamoa, the stick and carrot, every day we said, that Hashem said, if you do my way, you get this, if you don't, you don't. So for sure there is a concept that something happened for some reason somewhere, as a cause and effect. But it's not in our hand, that's called by heaven. And understood. We cannot say ever that this happened because of that. That's very, to say it strongly, I would say that's very not Jewish. to say that happened to that person as a result of that and that. That's a very dangerous path that I'll never take part of that. What we do know is the teshuvah. We know that when a person does teshuvah, tefillat, tzedakah, everything can turn around, all the severe decree. But by the same token, we know that there is a concept of mita b'dei shamayim, that it's a heavenly punishment for certain things. A person cannot get away with Hashem, can get away with lawyers in a regular court, but not get away with Hashem. Anyway, 24b. So the Torah said, "Ulemibeit laparochet va'avadetem." To that we thin the veil, and you shall serve. That's in the book of Numbers, chapter 18. So I give you a priesthood as a gift. So that's an indication to what? That's including that it's only with regard to service that are performed el mi beit laparochet u'da'avodat matana v'lo avodat siluk, within the veil, which means in the Holy of Holies, that only the Kohen Gadol enter. That there is a distinction between services and a non-Kohen who performs service of giving there, such as if he sprinkled the blood inside the Holy of Holies on Yom Kippur, is subject to death penalty. But habachutz afilu avodat siluk, but not one who performs service of removing there, such as removing the censers from the Holy of Holies on Yom Kippur. This leads to the conclusion that when it comes to service performed outside of the Holy of Holies, someone who's non-Kohen will be liable if he perform any service, even a service of removal of the ashes, such as remove the ashes from the altar. So the Gemara said, Ihache. If so, if that delimitation of a verse apply only to those services performed in the Holy of Holies, why should say the phrase va'avadetem nami, and you shall serve? So it's derived that one is liable only for a service that is complete, which is avodat matana. We explained several times avodat matana meaning full service you're giving on the altar, like incense, like libation of water, like sprinkle, etc. That on its own and not incomplete, but should also אל מבית לפרוכת הוא עבודת תמה ולא עבודה שיש אחרי עבודה, בחוץ אפילו עבודה שיש אחרי עבודה. But it should also be similarly limited to services performed to what is within the veil, because we said in that case the liability of someone who's not Kohen, which limited to cases where he performed a complete service, and does not apply if he performed a service that is only preparatory, and that's a preparatory for another service afterward. But afilu avodah sheyesh achrei avodah, but services that perform outside of the Holy of Holies, someone who's not Kohen should be liable even if the service that is incomplete and has a service afterward. So the Gemara answered and they said, Va'avadetem hadar arvei kra. So they said, because the Torah used the word Va'avadetem, and you shall serve, which means that that pasuk begins with the conjunction that used the word Vav, the letter Vav, which means meaning and, Vav, Va'avadetem, that indicates that the verse go back and combines the service performed within the veil together with the services performed outside of it. So we derive from that in a sense of halakha, there is no difference between service that perform outside and a service that perform inside. So what we understand? That according to Levi, Zar, someone who is a Kohen that does this type of work is not fitting. For example, if he's ritually impure, if he doesn't have the full dress, if he's onen, etc., he does this type of work. So if it's avodot siluk, remove of ashes that made outside, which means in the courtyard, but not applied to works in the Holy of Holies. So Rabbi asked, what happened to this certain type of work that performs specifically in that location? By Rabbi. Avodat siluk ba'echal mahu. What happened with service that removal performed in the sanctuary chamber? For example, it's called dishun mizbeach pnimi or dishun menorah, to take and remove all. Now in Hanukkah we understand it better, to take all the leftover in a menorah. Mahu. How we treated someone who's not feeding, who does this type of work? Lifnim medaminan lei or lachutz medaminan lei. How do you derive, how do you compare it? Do you compare it to removing the ashes inside the Holy of Holies, and therefore someone who's zar, who's doesn't have a mitah, death penalty, or we compare it to doing work outside and he deserves? So the Gemara Rabbi answered by himself and he said, Hadar Pshita. It's obvious if you zoom in the word of the Torah said, Mi beit ul mi beit. So he said, the Torah said within the veil, so it will have been understood that he's referring only to action performed in the Holy of Holies. But since the Torah said ul mi beit and to what is within the veil, so that teaches us that beside the Holy of Holies, which is the sanctuary, so the sanctuary is exempt. Ela me'ata. So now, zar shesider et hashulchan lichayev. How about if you have, again, zar, remember the category of zar. Zar is under those category that is not fitting. So he take, for example, the shoe bread, right? That it's a lechem apanim. So he put it in a sanctuary on a table. So you tell me that he deserved that punishment? So the Gemara said, Ika sidur bazichim. So we derive that there is a subsequent, there is a continuation of, is like perpetual, is next work, which is the setting up the bazichin. You take das levona and put it on a table. So therefore, it's not avodat tama, it's not complete work, it's just part, and therefore remember the rules. As long as it's not complete, full work, is not deserve this punishment. So they said, okay, so how about sider bazichin lechayev? So maybe you said that if someone arranged the vessel and put together the bazichin, the what is called frankincense, he put it there, so he deserved mitah. So why you don't put it in the four category of works we mentioned earlier? For those who just came in, just 4 work are sprinkling, putting the incense, water of libation, and and the wine libation. This type of work considering full work. So the Gemara said, Ika siluk vehaktara. Again, they have subsequent, which is removing the ashes afterward, putting the incense on. So all that, it's an addition. It's not avodat tama. It's not complete type of work. So now we ask a question. How about, now it's so proper for Hanukkah, zar shesider et hamnorah lichayev. You have a golden candle burn. So you have someone who's zar. So after cleaning the ashes in the morning, and he, for example, someone who's not Kohen, he arranged the lamp of the candle burn, so should he be liable? So the Gemara said, no, that's not completed. You know why? Ika netinat ptila. What do? Then you place the wicks inside the menorah, inside the lamp, so that's completed the work. He didn't do it, he just do part of that. How about natan ptila lichayev? How about if he did also, he put in the menorah this week? So why you don't conclude it as part of the 4 type of work? Also, they're doing that in the menorah. Says, no, that's not completed. You know why? Ikan etinat shemen. We also have a part that is placing the oil. So again, you clean it, you put the wick, and you place the oil. So they said, how about natan shemen lechayev? How about if someone who's not priest, not Kohen, place the oil, should be liable? So they said, ikad laka. So lighting needs to be done. So again, it's not full, it's a part of. So how about hidlik lechayev? How about if he lit the candles, he should be liable? So they said, hadlaka alav avodai. So he said that lighting the lamp is not considering a bonfire temple service, because when you're doing it, nothing is done to the candle burn itself. So you see how, in a way, the rabbis try to be as lenient as possible with the derivative of the Torah liability of punishment. Okay, so they said, "Velo, you tell me that placing and lighting the lamp is not considering a avodah as type of work." Vehatanya, we derive from a Braita, we derive from pasuk in the book of Vayikra, Leviticus chapter 1. ונתנו בני אהרון הכהן אש על המזבח וערכו עצים על האש. The Torah said the sons of Aharon, the Kohen, the high priest, their son shall put the fire upon the altar and lay out wood in order upon the fire. So what do we derive from that? לימד על הצתת עליתה שלא תהא אלא בכהן כשר ובכלי שרת. That teaches that lighting, kindling the chips, it's called alita, added to keep the altar fire going, must perform only by a proper kohen, and that must be wearing the priestly garments. So he said, Hatzatat alita avodai, hadlaka alav avodai. So we said kindling the chip is bonfire service, but lighting the candle burn is not a bonfire service. So you see, all this discussion, we learn two things. We learn also what are the clear four categories, the definition of the four categories, but we also learn about lighting the candle burn, what's involved in that process and what's considering really quote-unquote full work. Gmara goes back and goes to a type of work that made outside. Outside meaning not in the Holy of Holies, but in the courtyard. They said, Ela me'ata. So since you tell me that completed the work, avodat tama, that's deserved the punishment. Zar shesider et ha'ma'aracha lechayev. If you have someone who's a not priest, who set up the arrangement of wood on the altar, should be liable. Why? Since that is a service involving placing. So why you don't put it as a category of that four? So the Torah said, Ika sidur shnei gzirei etzim. You remember in the morning when we do korbanot, we have the abaye. Abaye have a list. So part of the list is arrangement of two logs on the altar that remain to be done. So here you see that setting up the arrangement of wood is not a service that is complete on its own. So they said, Sider shnei gzirin lichayev. How about if someone who's a not Kohen arranged the two logs should be liable? So they said, Ika sidurei varim. There is still an arrangement of limbs of offering on the fire that remains to be done. So placing the two logs is also not considered a service that is complete on its own. So Veha Amar Rav Asi Amar Rabbi Yochanan Zar shesider shnei gzirei etzim chayav mita. So it's clear that Rav disagree with Rabbi Yochanan, because Rav did not mention the two gzirei etzim, the two logs, include that type of work that it deserved mita. So that's considering a full type of work. So they said behapligei. Here you have a disputation. Mar savar, Mar, it's Rabbi Yochanan, hold avodat tamahi, the two pieces of wood, it's considering hold, it's complete, its service complete. Mar savar Rav, that did not place this type of work as part of four, lav avodat tamahi, it's not considering a complete service. arrangement, the limbs, or on the wood, it's not full service. So Minchat Chinuch, Mitzvah Shin Tzadik, 390, elaborate on that and explain specifically what's involved in this category of work. Tanya Kvatei de Rav, Tanya Kvatei de Levi. So now we go back to the disputation we mentioned early in the Shiur, that there are Braita, subsequent Braita that follow the teaching of Rav. Rav, what did Rav tell us? That if Zar, that lift up the Deshen, is not deserve Mita, and there is another Braita that follow the teaching of Levi and said that he deserved Mita. So we try to juxtapose the two with the two and come to conclusions, okay? Tanya Kvatei de Rav, העבודות שזר חייב על המיטה, זריקת דם בין לפנים בין לפני לפנים, והמזה בחדתו ובמצה והמקטיר בולת האוב והמנסך 3 לוגים מים 3 לוגים יין. It's a long list that zar deserve mita, and you have, for example, sprinkling the blood, regardless if it's in or not in, meaning in the area of the sanctuary or not, and if someone sprinkle in the bird sin offering, etc., etc. So it's a long list. So they said that's follow the Rav. That's the list. So they don't mention Trumat Hadeshen. So it means that this Braita juxtaposed the way that Rav said. It's not part of that list, the Trumat Hadeshen. Tanya Kvatei de Levi. Here you see another Braita that said, עבודות שזר חייב עליהם מיתה מרים את הדשן משבע הזאת שבפנים שהוא מצורע במלא על גבי המזבח מדבר כשר מדבר פסול. You see a list of different things, and in that list, all of a sudden you see the first on the list, one who removed the ashes from the altar. So you see here in this Braita that deserve mita. So you see two Braitot that juxtapose each and every opinion. Now we go back to the Mishnah. We said that the Kohanim gather together 4 times a day to make this lottery in order to determine who is going to win of the work that day. So the Gemara asks, Lama mefisim? Why we need to do the hold lotteries between the Kohanim? So he said, Lama mefisim kede amaran? What we said earlier. He said that in order to avoid conflict, so you have to have a lottery. When you have a lottery, you solve this problem. You remember our discussion in the previous session, all this crisis that happened. Everyone remember that? This crisis that happened. One time they ran 2 Kohanim, ran quickly to the ramp, and one hit the other, and the other one broke his leg, the Mishnah said. It was another mental case, extreme case, that 2 Kohanim ran, and one lost, and he stabbed the other one. So because it was all kind of crisis, the sages come up with the idea that they have to have a lottery to avoid all this competition and crisis. So they said, Ela, that's the previous daf. So Ela lama mefisim v'chozrim u'mefeisim. Why you have to gather together 4 times a day to do this lottery? Why you don't do it 1 time in a day? Rashi said it was 4 different times a day. So it's a disputation if it's really 4 times a day or 4 times in 1 time. Anyway, for lottery. Amar Rabbi Yochanan, kedei lehargish kol ha'azara. That is in honor of Hashem to have many people. Shene'emar, they said in Tehillim in Psalm 55, Asher yachdav namtik sod bevet Elokim ne'alech beragesh. They said that we took sweet counsel together in the house of the Lord, we walk with a throng. So it means that is, in a way, it's honor of Hashem when you have many people get together for that. And let's face it, when you have this type of competition and lottery, many people come into. So they said, Bameh mefaisim. How you do it? You do it while they carry the daily mundane priesthood, or when the Kohanim wear the sacred garments. Rav Nachman amar bebigdei chol. So go in the regular, and one who won take off his weekly clothing and wear a sacred one. Rav Sheshet amar bebigdei kodesh. Rav Sheshet said you have to have a sacred garment. Rav Nachman Amar bebigdei chol, we explain each opinion. Rav Nachman said that they go by the regular daily garments. Why? De'i amart bigdei kodesh ikabel ezro dechamse v'avdei. Oy, oy, oy. He says, you know why? Because if you have them wear a sacred garments, there are people who are, have muscles, which means that people who are very forceful, demanding, people who fight. You just need to go to a Black Friday YouTube and watch what people do, right? So you have all kind of people, right, that does all kind of things in a very aggressive way. So we want to avoid that, right? Rav Sheshet Amar bebigdei kodesh. Someone forward to me. Don't think I'm wasting my time on this. Someone forward to me. You know, he said that he went there and he picked up something, and then standing in line and have all this fight is not worth it. Not worth the money. Anyway, son of one of our congregants. Anyway, Di Amar de bigdei chol. If you tell me that they're wearing weekly garments, agav chavivutei mikru ve'avdei. So the Kohanim that win this lottery, they're going to do this work without wearing the bigdei kehuna, the special garment. Amar Rav Nachman menam minalan. How do you know that they're wearing these garments, the daily garments, when they do this lottery? The Tnan. We learned in Mishnah in Tractate Talmud, chapter 5. Mesarun lachazanim. Chazanim in that place, it's not a cantor. It means that the shames in our language is the ushers, the people who are involved with the arrangement. So והיו מפשיטין אותן את בגדיהן. So they take off their garments. ולא היו מניחים עליהם על המכנסיים בלבד. They leave only their trousers on them. 25. My love, באותן שזכו לפייס, which means that apply to specifically the Kohanim, that Tosfot said that these Kohanim that won this lottery, these are the one that take off the weak garments and wear the sacred garment, which means that they wear the regular one when they do this lottery. אמר רב הונא בר יהודה, אמר רב ששת לא, באותם שלא זכו לפיס, that the opposite, that they take off the sacred garments and they wear the regular. הכנמי מסתברא, that's more, you can derive so too, is reasonable to follow Rav Sheshet's interpretation of the Mishnah. This, if you tell me that that's applied to those who won these lotteries, so they take off the weekly garments and wear the sacred. They only have their trousers on them. So one will have to explain that the priest is subsequently done the sacred cloth on the top of the non-sacred trousers, and that they will remove the non-sacred trousers and place them with the sacred one. We said it yesterday clearly, that they have to be, these trousers attached to their flesh, and nothing should have a partition between the flesh and the trousers. So that's a text in the book of Vayikra, Leviticus chapter 16. Ve'idach, so how Rahman explained it? So he said, "Halokashya ad ktani ad shodan alehem bigdei chol, malbishim otam mechnasei kodesh, והיו מפשיטים אותם בגדי חול ומניחים מכנסיים בלבד." So it's only difference in the trousers that they use sacred one. אמר רב ששת בן עמין, how do you know? The Tanya, לשכת הגזית, we have to go a little further because I want to go to the Mishnah. Rav Sheshet said that the Kohanim wear these sacred garments at the time of the lottery, because they said לשכת הגזית כמית בסילקי גדולה הייתה. לשכת הגזית was a large, tall house. Pais במזרחה, the Kohanim stand in the east part of the lottery. Vezaken, zaken, it's elder, meaning wise man of the Sanhedrin, that he put the order of the lottery. Yoshev במערבה, he sat on the western part. והכהנים מוקפים ועומדים כמין בוך ליער. It's like they standing like in a circle. והממונה, the one who in charge of this lottery, בא ונוטל מסנבת בראשו של אחד מהם ויודעים שמנו פיס מתחיל. So what did they do? The Kohanim sit and they have this hat. So one of them, the one who in charge for that, he goes and he pick up one Kohen, his hat, and by picking that hat, we know that this is the one who will start counting. And he said, and then the next thing is someone else come in and give a number, and you start count from that person, go around the circle several times. And the Rabbi said that he put back the head, so not leaving without yarmulke, without something cover him. But he's the first one, and you go around the circle, and that's the way you count them.
Do they do that every day?
They do it according to that four times.
4 times a day.
How many different...
If someone said 60, someone said 100, boom, pick up the head,
so
start counting.
Yeah,
but we said, later we said that use fingers instead of using the, we don't count the head, you count, each Kohen needs to raise his finger. If you tell me that they were, at the time of the lottery, regular garments, when you're wearing a regular or weekly garments, you don't wear the hat. So it can be, and you tell me that part of the lottery is that the one who in charge pick up a hat. So they said in, so it's possible that the Kohanim wear this mitznefet, that it's not part of daily mundane garments. Why? Because כדתנא רב יהודה ויתמר רב שמואל בר יהודה, כהן שעשתה לו עמו כותנת, עובד בעבודת יחיד. You have a spoiled Jewish boy that have a good mother, and she made for him a special hat. Right? Most probably he was American. I'm joking. So she made for him, so he can have that hat wearing in the Beit HaMikdash, right? But then he needs to give it to the public. In other words, it's not his anymore, it's just one time. That's most of the rabbis hold. Anyway, Amar Abaye Shma Mina. Abaye said, we derive from that, Lishkat HaGazit chetzia b'kodesh v'chetzia b'chol. The chamber of horn store was built half in a sacred area and half within the consecrated area in the Beit HaMikdash, in the temple, and half in a non-sacred part of the temple grounds. Ushma mina, we derive another thing, Shnei ptachim hayula, they have two entrances, Echad patuach b'kodesh v'echad patuach b'chol. One go to the courtyard, which is a sacred area, and one is open to the outside area, that it's non-sacred. We prove each point. The if you tell me that this Lishkat HaGazit, it's totally in a sacred place and they have the sanctity of the courtyard. How you tell me elder person from the Sanhedrin sit in the western part? So it's not honor of heaven to have these elders sitting over there. Only the king, the descendants of King David. The Torah said, העומדים שם לפני השם, and then they said in the book of Samuel, chapter 7, that ויבוא המלך דוד וישב לפני השם. So it means that that's designated place for them. ויסגדת החולה בחול, אם you tell me that they sit outside in a non-sacred place, פייס במזרחה, you tell me that it's in the eastern part, והנה בבית אלוקים נהלך ברגש. We mentioned that sentence in the book of Tehillim, chapter 55, that we have to have a special decorum of honor in the house of the Lord. So you said that Veleika, if it's outside of the courtyard, it doesn't have that sacred designated area. You have to say that half is sacred and half is non-sacred. So the western part, half part that the elder person was sitting, it was outside of the temple courtyard. So in other words, also the Sanhedrin sat in that chamber. It's called Lishkat HaGazit, but Meiri said that they sat in the area that it's non-sacred. That's also Rambam said. So if you tell me that they have one entrance and is open to the sacred area, so Zaken Yoshe b'Ma'arava, how you tell me that the elder person sit in the western part? We learn in the Mishnah in Tractate Maaser Sheni, chapter 3, Mishnah 8, Haleshachot, those chambers that was built in the courtyard, Habnuyot Bachol Uftuchot LaKodesh, that was built in a non-sacred area, but they have entrance to the sacred area, Tochan Kodesh. So since they connected to the Kodesh, something that is inside, it's already considered as sacred. So therefore, how you tell me that they sit there? So it doesn't have that recognition of sacredness that the Kohen needs to, the elder needs to be. If you tell me that it's open to the non-sacred area, So he said, Pais b'mizracha, how could the lottery be held in the east? Ve'atnan, we learn in the continuation of that Mishnah, Habnuyot b'kodesh uftuchot lachol, tochan chol, chambers that build in a sacred area, but which open up into a non-sacred area, the space within them is considered entirely non-sacred, despite the chamber location on sacred territory. So, el alav shma mina. So you have to derive from that a conclusion. Shnei ptachim ayula. The chamber of hornstone had two doorways. Echad patuach b'kodesh, one that opened into the sacred area, which is to the eastern part. Ve'echad patuach lachol, and one that opened into a non-sacred area, and that led to the west part. So since they have two entrances to two different sides, whatever built within the domain of the courtyard is considered as sacred, and what is outside is considered non-sacred. That's what Yeshanim said. The Rambam tells us in Sefer Avodah, Ilchot Beit HaMikdash, chapter 9, Avodot zar chayav alei mita. It is prohibited for a non-priest, not Kohen, to serve in the temple. But one who does so incurs the death penalty, the mita bidei shamayim, by heaven, only by participation in one of these services. Zrika, sprinkling the blood, burning offering on the altar, pouring out the water libation on Sukkot once a year, and pouring out the wine libation. So that's basically follow the opinion of Rav. How about Zar Behaza'ah? A non-priest who perform one of the sprinkling services, whether outside of the altar or inside the sanctuary, or any of the sprinklings of the leper, incurs again mita b'dei shamayim, the same idea. We said avodat matana, only a kohen is permitted to remove the ashes from the altar. A non-kohen who performs the service is punished with malkot, but does not incur a death penalty. Death penalty is incurred only for service involving giving, not by those involving removal. So that's Rambam, Ilchot Beit HaMikdash, chapter 9, and as we explained several times, those points of death penalty apply only by heaven, not by us, not by the regular Bet Din. We talk also about the Sidur Shnei Gzirei Etzim. A non-priest who arranged the two logs on the altar, again, he is liable to mita b'dei shamayim, but it's by the hand of God. And that's the opinion of Rabbi Yochanan, Rambam, Ilchot Beit HaMikdash, chapter 9. And we talk also about the what type of garments they used to have for the lottery. So during the lottery, the Kohanim wore the priestly garments, and the Rambam ruled, according to opinion of Rav Sheshet, because the principle that halacha is ruled always according to Rav Sheshet. So they have this type of garments wearing for the lottery. We said Mesarua lechazanim. After the lottery, the winner will set out to perform the day's services. Attendants, the chazanim, meaning in our language the shamis, took the clothes of the other priests, leaving them in the trousers, at which point they put out the non-sacred clothes before removing the sacred trousers and putting all the clothes back in the place. That's the Rambam Ilchot Midim Musafim, chapter 4. And we also learn about Lishkat Hagazit, the chamber of the hornstone. So it's a big discussion where it's located. So the Rambam said in Ilchot Beit HaBchira, chapter 5, that was built in a sacred area of the Beit HaMikdash, of the temple, and half in a non-sacred area, which means it was half and a half. It had two doorways, one opening in a sacred area, one opening in a non-sacred area, and the non-sacred part of the chamber was the seat of the Sanhedrin. So that's the elder who sit there and put the rules. And we said that they have a special kedusha, the chambers that were built in the rampart, the step embankment surrounding the temple. If the sole doorways open to the sacred area of the courtyard, the entire interior was considered sacred. However, in the case of the chambers that were built in a sacred area, if they open solely into non-sacred area, interior considered non-sacred. And we said that it was several lotteries during the day. So Apais Hasheni, the second lottery in the temple, was held in order to taking the tasks of the morning service. And then they have the daily morning burn offering, sprinkling the blood, removing the ashes from the inner altar, and candle burn, and bringing up the limbs of the animal, along with the attendant's meal offering and wine libation. All of that put in the altar ramp. In total, it was 13 Kohanim won the privilege to serve based on this lottery, and the sequence of their actions, the Mishnah listed, and again, that the one who put it together is the Rambam, הלכות תלמידים ומוספים, chapter 4.